And we welcome you into another edition of the Dodgers Prospects Podcast. I am Casey Porter, joined by, as I do each week, Tim Rogers. And Tim, it's good to see you again. And what's on your mind this afternoon?
Well, definitely baseball, but more of the minor league variety with what's going on with the lockout, which is not looking good. The news out today was not good. They're not moving any closer together other than very, very minimal things. So, we've had some good comments regarding some questions and some players. And so we're going to incorporate those again, just like we did last week, into our show. It helps to spur our where we want to go, because I know between Casey and I, we've got a lot of topics we'd like to eventually cover.
Yeah,
but we really want to make sure that we're covering what you guys want to hear and you girls want to hear, because the Dodgers minor league system has hundreds of great stories to talk about, and so there's so many good players, there's so much competition, and it's just and it's a good group of people. Yep. The kids that I've met out there, I know that Casey met, we've been very impressed. And the Dodgers do emphasize things like character as they start looking for these players. So that's kind of what on my mind is trying to see what's on your mind so we can keep working towards what you all want to hear. And so today we're going to be talking quite a bit about third base and the competition that's there. We have the excellent Justin Turner, but also getting a little older, and he's the defensive metrics are slipping, and he did slow down, and he got really hurt at the end of the year during the playoffs. I mean, and so with the DH coming, there's an opening for at least some part-time work at third base. So that's kind of where I'm at.
Yeah, and third base is a hot button topic for Dodgers fans because, as you mentioned, Justin Turner getting a little bit older, and people are, I would say, worried would be probably at the top end, and then at least interested would be at the bottom end as far as where the Dodgers fans are from third base. So we're going to talk about some of the prospects the Dodgers have coming up, some of the guys they already have in place that are coming off of injury, like Edwin Rios. We're going to break their games down, and kind of give you, well, at least in my opinion, the order of which I think those players will have as far as the pecking order in terms of who gets first shot at it, second shot at it, who's down the line, who although the person who may end up being the starter right after Justin Turner, will that be the person that's the long-term starter for the Dodgers at that position? So there's many different questions to dive in as far as that goes. So we're gonna talk about several guys that definitely have the ability to replace Justin Turner at third base, and we're going to break that down. But I know before we do, we have a guy that I know that you want to talk about from UCLA, a pitcher that is another one of those big power arm guys with the slider, the tumbling and fading changeup. Nick Nastrini, a guy that, you hear all about the Bobby Millers and the Ryan Pepios and the Mitchell Whites and the Andre Jacksons, the Gus Varlands, the Michael Groves, the Landon Knacks, and then the Hyunil Choi's, the Carlos Durans, the Robinson Ortizes, the Gavin Stones. The Dodgers are just absolutely, completely loaded with power arms. One thing the Dodgers don't have a lot of is lefties, and I talked to one of them last week, Lyle Lockhart. I've talked to John Rooney about a month and a half ago, both very good left-handers. Robinson Ortiz, I just mentioned a while back. But I know you want to talk about Nick Nastrini, a kid out of UCLA with the big power arm, a young kid that just got signed. So I know you want to talk about him just a little bit.
Yeah, just real quick on him. So, there is a plethora of right-handed prospects.
Yes.
If you go to look at the Dodgers' top 30 prospects, 12 to 15 of them are probably right-handed starters. Now, the reality is that not all of them will stick around. I mean, as you know, the Dodgers traded both Josiah Gray and Gerardo Carrillo in the Scherzer-Turner trade. And so they are trade pieces. Now, Nick Nastrini is a guy that he kind of popped on my radar. I've seen a couple other people talk about him a little bit, but he there was a comment about him recently that I remember. I don't remember if it was on this site or my own or the 2080 site, but Fangraphs talked about him a lot, and Fangraphs has been pretty good about spotting these folks that you may not have heard of.
Sure.
And so they're the ones I first kind of got on my radar, Yorbit Vivas. I hadn't really, dug into him much. I mean, there's, 180 players in the organization, and then you see a Fangraphs look at him because they have some eyes on site there in Arizona. And so a little bit of background on Nastrini. He just turned 22.
20, yeah.
Yeah, and he was drafted in round 431st overall from UCLA. Through UCLA, he had that thoracic outlet syndrome surgery, which is the thing where the ribs and everything else gets kind of messed up. Josh Beckett had that. There's quite a few others that have it. So he had that through college. It reduced some of his marketability there in college, and he has some command issues. That just happens. I'll probably be dropping an article with some more details about him with some links and things like that. But what he did in only 14 innings in 2021 was he had 14 innings, 30 Ks.
Yeah.
Okay, and only 7 hits. Now the gave up 7 hits, but he did have 7 walks. So that's still the concern. I mean, that's the main weakness that's talked about him is the command issues. And so, he's got the 4 pitches. I mentioned the slider. He can top out at 98, but he averages about 93 on the fastball. Kind of a good pitcher's build. He has a good changeup, and the curve is his 4th pitch. It sounds like
it's his getting over strike pitch. Yeah, what a lot of the Dodgers pitchers like to do is they like to throw that what I call just that little flipper, where they can just kind of throw that thing in there for strike one, just to give a strike one pitch something other than their fastball. That only increases the effective velocity of their fastball. So that 4th pitch, that curveball, a lot of times for the Dodgers is just that get me over strike pitch for them.
Yeah. And and of course with the instruction and stuff, it'll probably, I'm sure it's going to get better. And so that's just a guy to start watching out for. And Fangraphs actually tags him as they think he could be in the top 100 prospects in 2023.
I think all
cool.
of the Dodgers right-handed pitching prospects, as you mentioned a minute ago, could be in the, a couple guys that, of course, there's a whole bunch of them that we haven't talked about, but 2 right-handed pitchers that Dodgers fans may have not heard about, and I've got stories on both of them on Dodger Poke Report, very extensive interviews. Great young men that top out. Of course, Nick Robertson, one of them I'm going to talk about, topped out at 100 this last season in July. So Nick Robertson opened a couple of games. He has a he's very multiple and versatile in the roles that you can use him. He has done nothing but get better and better and better from James Madison. That's a young man. I promise you, as long as he stays healthy, he will be a long-time major leaguer. And another one, he's 6'7". Another one is Mark Washington out of Lehigh, 6'8" pitcher. That if you go to Dodger Poke Report, I did a feature cut on him. If you watch the riding effect that he works with his fastball, then the tumble and fade that he tunnels that fastball off of. He gets a lot of what he calls vertical drop. He tunnels his pitches. He tunnels his pitches very well in the sense that he starts his fastball in one location, starts the curveball and the changeup off the same location, but instead of the ball staying up in the zone, the ball drops, and so it gives a very good, effective vertical drop to the hitter. So Mark Washington, Nick Robertson are another 2 right-handers that I think the Dodgers fans really need to know about. Neither one of them are in the top 30. I don't care. I'm not much on generic top 30 lists anyways, because when you look at the game of baseball, it's such a grind. There's so much failure to it. There's so much daily, what I call the process to it, that it's just impossible to tell which prospects are going to make it through to the other side and which ones won't.
Right.
But these 2 are guys, as long as they stay healthy, Mark Washington and Nick Robertson, that I promise you will both be in the major leagues. Kind of in that mold of Nastrini, like you were talking about, just that big power arm. Robertson has 3 pitches. He doesn't throw the curveball anymore, but had a curveball at one point in time. I'll be interested to see if Nastrini keeps that 4th pitch with him as he goes on, or if he, as a starter, if they put him in the pen like they have Robertson and Washington, both guys that started in college, and then just kind of combine that slider. Like Robbie Pito, a guy I talked to just last week, he has both the curveball and a slider. but he just kind of calls it one pitch, and then based on the count, if he needs to throw a strike, it has more of a curveball look to it. If he needs to strike out, it has more of a slider shape to it. So I'll be interested to see how they work the breaking pitch of Nastrini and the power arm from there, and the role that they put him in, because the role that they decide to put him in, like Gavin Stone, who was a closer in college and the Friday night starter, he's been a high leverage reliever in the Dodgers organization, and also a starter too. So depending on the role that they choose for him in the future, that will shape the type of pitches that he ends up with. So an exciting future for him. Another one of those guys that is going to be exciting to follow, and another power arm in the Dodgers organization. So Nick Nastrini, very, very exciting prospect.
Yeah, one of the things about Washington, I believe that he is eligible for the Rule 5 draft.
Yeah.
And I would take him in a heartbeat. I mean, that's a guy that projects up, in my opinion. He suffered, I think it was from blisters in 2019, maybe even before that. And then Robertson is a guy that, he's another guy that I did an article on also. Gosh, it's almost 2 years ago.
Has already had his Tommy John, so he's good there.
Yeah, and then Gavin Stone, I got to see him a lot at Rancho. He looked really good. Yeah. And
go Bears, by the way, UCA.
I ran into Charlie Huff.
Yeah.
During we were both kind of waiting for our media passes, or Charlie was waiting for his ticket. Unbelievable, right?
Yeah.
Right. Here's Charlie Huff. It's like, just let him in. But I was just talking with him, and when I mentioned Gavin Stone, his eyes lit up.
Yeah.
He
kid's
really
competitive, man. The kid's competitive, and if you know anything about him, if you've talked to any of his college coaches, his teammates, done any research on this kid, as big as the right arm is, which it's huge. He reached as high as 98 this year with his fastball. Yep. The best qualities aren't physical. He is one of the best teammates that you'll ever have. He's a leader. He's inspirational. His teammates love him. He is an absolute joy to have in a dugout. His last outing at UCA in 2020 was his fourth outing, and he threw a no-hitter by himself. And the thing that's impressive about that is when you go and look at some of the comments he's had about the no-hitter he threw for the Bears, he talks about everything but himself. He talks about how his teammates were his brothers, and how the funnest part of it for him was that he got to enjoy that entire experience with all of his best friends. So Gavin Stone, man, yeah, there's another one that, of course, right now you can see me. I'm lighting up like a Christmas tree myself. But that kid, wow, that's all I got to say about him.
And again, seeing Charlie Huff kind of react.
Yeah,
I've seen that with some other coaches talking about other players that the top 30s and all those are fun just to go look at and get familiar with players and look at different ones and go, I just like to go and who else is out there that we might be missing. But there's a Dodger top 30 that they have that is probably not even close to the list that we see out there. Right. They could have a Mark Washington or Nick. I think Nick Robertson's in their own top 30.
Yeah,
I thought he broke the top 30.
Surely Ryan Noda. I mean, he led Double-A in walks and home runs, and anybody who does a top 30 list and doesn't put him on it, no thanks. Yeah. I don't. Your list is not legitimate.
They focus too. And these are legit things, but they focus like on age and things like that. Well, you know what? A 27-year-old rookie with 8-9 years of productivity that's ready to roll.
Yeah.
Give me that.
Well, and here's another thing that you have to look at, like with a Mark Washington or a Nick Robertson. Nick only threw a little over 50 innings in college. He had the Tommy John surgery. So I don't know why you would look at age instead of innings pitched, because when you look at innings pitched, his arm is basically like a 21-year-old. So, those guys can look at age all they want and say, well, he's 24, 25 years old, so he's getting a little bit older. Means nothing to me. What means the most to me is the amount of use on the arm. How has it been protected? When you look at the ways that they protected his arm at James Madison, the things that they did to make sure that he was draftable, that his best baseball was ahead of him. I don't care what age he is. His arm has been very well taken care of, and he has a long, long career ahead of him with good arm health. As long as everybody has issues from here to there that they can't control, but that's everybody. So in my opinion, age for Washington Robertson, either one of them, even Ryan Noda as well. That's irrelevant to me. So if they're not in the top 30 of anybody's list, then that top 30, in my opinion, really has no legitimacy whatsoever. So
yeah, and you bring up the taking care of the arms, and there are some colleges that have done a terrible job.
Yes.
Of taking care of arms and
or
wrecking guys. Yeah. Oh, definitely high schools. I've seen
Nick's high school coach was a major leaguer, so I mean he understood what he had in front of him and made sure that Nick was taken care of, and so from that perspective, there's more to dive into than just to say he's 25.
Yep.
That kind of thing. That's kind of what we're saying.
And that's what the Dodgers are doing. I mean, they know what they've got. They stick with some of these guys. You go, why are they bringing up a 26, 27-year-old guy? Oh, because he's good.
Yeah, real good.
Matt Beatty is in the organization because he get hit.
Yeah.
Pure and simple.
He needs more bats.
Well, speaking of Matt Beatty, who has played third base just a little bit in his career,
I've never seen him play third base. Honestly, I would be interested to watch that.
He actually played a couple innings with the Dodgers.
Okay. Very
good. But that doesn't. He's a hitter.
Yeah, right, no doubt. He reminds me of Matt Stairs. Remember him, the professional hitter?
Oh yeah,
yeah. Yes. That's who he reminds me of. He needs more bats.
I think that's a really good a good parallel there.
I think that's a good segue to third base.
Yep.
So let's dive in and the guy, in my opinion, that's getting overlooked the most, and I had gotten to see him a whole lot in Tulsa. And then in Oklahoma City. In fact, he spent an entire year in Tulsa and an entire year in Oklahoma City. So I probably got to see 500-600 at bats of his. And I can tell you, of all the guys that I've seen, the most amount of power that anybody that I've ever seen has, number one, is Matt Davidson, of which the Dodgers just sent to the Diamondbacks. And I just cannot even imagine what Matt Davidson's going to do in the altitude of Reno, because that guy, he had a 112-mile-an-hour single. He hit one over the scoreboard. I can't imagine what he's going to do in Reno. But the next two guys on my list are DJ Peters, of which DJ's with the Rangers and had a pretty decent end to the Rangers. He got picked up on waivers in August by the Rangers and had a pretty decent end to 2021. Then the next guy, as far as just raw power, and when you hit the ball, you just go, wow, is a guy named Edwin Rios. And he's out of, I believe, Florida. It's either Florida Atlantic or Florida International. I believe it's Florida International.
I believe so, yeah.
He's another college guy that left-handed swing, right-handed thrower, and big old body, 6'4", 6'5", very athletic, big arm, lots of bat speed, lots of power. The problem is equal swing and miss. But here's the deal with Edwin. I've seen him when he was healthy, and the swing and miss goes away a lot when he's healthy. And I can tell you, when you're not healthy trying to hit major league pitching, it's tough, which is why I think people are overlooking Cody Hosey, because when you're trying to deal with an oblique injury and trying to face 96, 97 every night, it's not fair. But I think the first guy in line to replace Justin Turner, when and if that happens, would be Edwin Rios. I think he's the most major league ready. He's the closest to the major leagues in terms of having those kind of at-bats. He has 500-600 AAA at-bats. He has 500-600 AA at-bats. He has, I don't know how many major league at-bats, but more than anybody else we're going to talk about today.
Yeah.
So I think Edwin Rios, from a tools perspective, from an experience perspective, I think is the guy that would probably get the first shot to see what he can do.
Yeah, Rios, people forget. I mean, he was a key player in 2020.
Yeah.
He was able to he replaced JT after he tested positive, and he actually finished the World Series on the field.
I forgot about that. He sure did.
Yeah, and he had a couple of home runs in the playoffs. What we saw though is in 2021 he was terrible, and then we found out why. It wasn't because he all of a sudden turned into a bad ball player. It's because he was hurt.
Yes,
he had a labrum surgery. He's going to be recovered. That he will be a very valuable player on that team. Yeah, I agree. I think he's going to get a lot of reps. JT's going to DH plenty. I think you'll still see Taylor probably get a few reps at third also. I think they're going to need to do that. It really does just, it depends on, of course, what they do at second base and at first base and Muncy's health, and if they sign some guy from Atlanta.
I just giggle when people underrate Gavin Lux, but that's a topic for another day.
That guy's going to play. Yeah, Luxy has to play. And I think we talked about it on the phone when we were chatting about this show.
Yeah.
We talked about Luxy for a long time. I don't want to see him at third base unless they actually work with him at third base.
I've seen him at third base at Oklahoma City quite a bit. I don't want to see him at third base.
Okay,
he's just
fair
not.
enough.
I think if you gave him maybe a couple seasons there, it'd be fine.
Yeah.
But he's not at all comfortable at third base. Obviously,
and he shouldn't be.
His home's at shortstop. He's adjusted to second base.
Yep.
He's had no consistent playing time whatsoever. So he's in
a
the
middle
period,
infielder.
Right. He's in the middle of his career where he's just trying to survive and carve out some kind of role where he can gain some consistency. And until the Dodgers give him that, kind of like we were talking about Matt Beatty, until Gavin Lux gets some kind of consistent role where he can show up every day, know what he's expected to do, you're going to kind of see the good and the bad both. So Gavin Lux, the young man, I'm just telling you, that kid's dynamite. Yeah. But that's a topic for another day.
Yeah, and we should, I'm excited to have Rios back. I forgot about the guy in so many ways, and he's technically not a rookie anymore, but he does have a ring. He's got some playoff experience. He's a guy that and he's a guy. He was terrible on defense when he started. Yeah, his mobility. He doesn't have the greatest mobility. That's a guy that's worked really hard to get pretty darn decent at defense, where he might be at least an average third baseman, maybe better with the bat and all that stuff. We'll see what happens, but I'm excited about him.
I think with the arm
he can
talent,
stick at third.
I think with the arm talent he brings, he could be every bit of an average, if not an above average defensive player. I've seen him quite a bit at third base, and the glove is fine. The range, third base, the ball's hit so hard over there. It's more about anticipation, first step, than it is actually athletic ability. He has that first step. He has good anticipation. He has a big arm, so I could see him being a plus defender. The question for him is going to come down to swing and miss. Yeah. If he can reduce his swing and miss without reducing his power at the same time, he's going to be the third baseman for the Dodgers. But that is a big if for him.
And along with the swing and miss is, the Dodgers will fall right in, and I hate it when they do this to the young guys. Yeah. They fall right into the platoons. Yeah. And, all of a sudden they don't see him. No, Eddie had a few at-bats and a few home runs against lefties in 2020. So I think you got to give a guy some runway. If they're going to do this terrible expanded playoffs, you might as well let him play a lot if they're going to get in the lineup, and don't worry. You always worry about wins and losses, but developing a player, I think they did that to Jock. They platooned him right away. They even tried that a little bit, like in 2016, briefly with Corey Seager a little bit. There's a few times he sat early in the season against lefties. I'm like, and I was talking to a coworker, like, I don't like that either. Yeah. But so Eddie Rios, he's going to be a big factor. He's going to make the 20, 26, 28, 30-man roster, whatever it's going to be. Let's hope there's a roster. Well, who's the next guy we want to talk about?
Well, I think the obvious choice is Miguel Vargas. He's the closest one. I think people need to keep in mind that as late as July, Miguel was still in high A ball, which is a long ways away from the major leagues. As close as it is, just 2 steps away, high A is still a long ways away from the major leagues. Now, when he came up to Tulsa, Double-A Tulsa, he was absolutely smoking hot. He ended up winning the hitting crown in the Double-A Central Division of Double-A baseball. So extremely good hitter. He's the exact opposite of Edwin Rios. He's an inside-out guy that's going to make a lot of contact. He's going to be a gap-to-gap guy. He's going to be a low-line drive guy. And then at third base, he's going to be a guy I'll be interested to see. If, defensively, the end game there. We've seen what the Dodgers have done with guys like Max Muncy and guys that came up that needed improvement defensively. I think he's one of those guys. I think the Dodgers are one of the best developmental programs, if not I think they are the best developmental program in the game. So he's in the right organization, but I think if you would ask me this time last year, the next guy in line would have been Cody Hosey. Right. But because of the oblique injury in 2021, because of the great season that Miguel Vargas had as the hitting crown and as the hitting crown champion in Double-A, I think he probably right now is the next guy in line at third base. But I think 2022 will be huge for Hosey. So where are you at on that?
Yeah, there were a couple things on Vargas. So I did a couple breakdowns, like position wise. He actually played 17 games at second base, 84 at third, 10 at first, and then 10 DH. Now at Great Lakes, his slash line, which is average on base percentage and slugging, 314, 366, 532 at Great Lakes. Then he came to Tulsa, and initially I looked at the game logs, and he started really slow in Tulsa, but he finished 321, 386, 523. So in 2 of the 3 slashes, he actually got better in Double A. And we talked last week about Double A pitching, how that's really good pitching.
You know, that matched the entire Tulsa team. You know, Michael Bush, one of the big prospects. We talked about him to a very large extent last week. Started out really, really slow. I mean, really slow. And then right about the end of July, picked it up and then had that amazing September we talked about. Devin Mann, a guy we're going to talk about here in a minute, got off to a really, really slow start for the Drillers. Then right about mid-July, here he came and he got really hot. So that what you're talking about with Miguel Vargas, you know, you talk about hitting is contagious, and it absolutely is. And the Drillers just seemingly all got hot at the exact same time. Vargas was the ringleader of that, and then you had the insertion of Justin Yurchek, who hit 365, which was almost 50 points higher than even Miguel Vargas, but he didn't have enough Double A at bats to qualify for the hitting crown. James Outman came up at that time when Jaron Kendall had broken his foot, and then if you remember in that Nats trade, Donovan Casey was traded away. Donovan Casey, trust me, will be a major league center fielder. I think he was the best center fielder from Double A on up at the current time, between Double A and Triple A at that time. He's a great player, but then he got traded away. James Outman came up, so you inserted James Outman, who brought a lot of energy. You inserted Justin Yurchek, who just hit and hit and hit. Hunter Fiducia, the catcher for that team, got really hot. Miguel Vargas was hot. Then Devin Mann had the multi-home runs in 7 games in a row. Ryan Noda was in the midst of leading Double A Central in all home runs. Michael Bush had the September that we talked about, you know, last week, where he hit 400 and had multi-hit games in like 6 games out of the last 12 that they played. So that Drillers team was amazing. It was led by Miguel Vargas. So those stats that you just mentioned are not surprising whatsoever. They literally go with the entire team of Tulsa, how they all went.
Yeah, I've got Mann's numbers for September. It's 323, 386, 790 slug with 8 bombs and 62 at bats. I mean, that's on fire.
And that weekend in Amarillo, he hit multiple home runs in what did I say? I just said it a minute ago. I just lost my number.
You said 7 games?
Yeah. And it was one of the most amazing. Devin Mann's power surge with you know, and he was a pretty big prospect coming out of Louisville. I mean, he's a big, tall, rangy guy that he's kind of a first baseman, third baseman guy. They played him some in left field. He hadn't played left field since high school, I believe. And then went out there, just did what the team needed him to, and did a really good job out there. So I think he probably profiles as a third baseman if you were to profile the best position for him. So there's another guy that has, you know, he's long, he's athletic, he's toolsy, he's a guy that can get very hot. He has a good hit tool, good defensive player, versatile. So there's another guy in line at third base that the Dodgers, you know, I mean, they're going to take a real long look at him and evaluate where he stands in the organization. I'm going to look up that exact number of the multiple home run games in a row, because that's driving me insane. If you don't mind.
You do that. I'm going to talk real quick about, you talked about versatility with Devin Mann. So position breakdown with him: first base, 34 games, second base, 13 games, third base, 12 games, which is disappointing to me. Left field, 20, center field, 8, right field, 18. So I got a good dose of Devin in 2019 with Rancho, and he had come in. He didn't play third base at all in 2018. He was only a second baseman, and so 2019 was a chance where they started moving him to third. It's also when his power started to really come up, and so he dominated out there at Rancho, and you know, it's really terrible that he lost that momentum for 2020. But the fact that they're playing him all over the place leads me to think that he's one of those guys that maybe he continues to play all over the place, which will only make him make the Dodger brass happier with him than that he could play all over the place. I was, like I said, I was disappointed he only got 12 games at third base. He kept getting better and better at third at Rancho. Now he lost some time at third base when they again promoted Miggy. And this last year, I mean, at third base at Tulsa, you had a lot of Miggy, you had Devin, and you had Cody Hosey. So I'm expecting this coming year at Tulsa. I expect Devin Mann to be in AAA. No reason for him to be in AA. I expect Miggy to be in AAA. So Cody Hosey, if it's me running the world, Cody Hosey is the third baseman at Tulsa, and you find out if he's got it. Because it's also,
no doubt, yeah.
It's also his Rule 5 draft year the next year. So you got to see if that's a guy that you want on your 40-man roster. Because that's a first-round pick. We know how valuable those is. They put more money into those guys, and there's a lot of hype around that, and they don't want to look bad. So I would expect Cody to repeat AA, and but
at least at the start,
yeah.
I think if you get to July and he's smoking hot, I think at that point you can move him up and see what he's got at the AAA level because. I'm just telling you, AAA is AA is where all your young prospects are at, and you're facing major league talent. There's no doubt about it. But what you're facing at the AAA level is you're facing major league experience. You're facing pitchers that probably have a couple hundred innings at the major league level that have major league type breaking stuff, major league type control. That whenever you go over scouting reports of hitters, they can hit those scouting reports. That's the thing about the younger levels is you might have a scouting report on a hole of a swing on a hitter, but the guys have the stuff, but they may not have the command to actually execute the game plan. At the AAA level, they can. You don't. And honestly, I think you see better stuff at the AA level in the terms of the higher fastballs, the more wicked breaking stuff, the more tumbling and fading changeups. But you see a lot more efficiency at the AAA level. So, the AAA levels, and Ryan Pepio got a whiff of this if you throw a pitch and it's 2 inches off the plate, a guy that has 500 major league at bats doesn't ever swing at it, and it's ball one, and you're sitting there going, oh wow, I'm used to that being strike one. What do I do now? So it is a totally whereas in A ball or AA ball, a guy may swing at a pitch 3 inches off the plate and hit a weak ground ball to shortstop, or just simply may put himself in a hole that a AAA hitter won't do. So I think that, the combination between getting to see what you can do against the dynamic stuff of AA pitchers and then moving yourself up to AAA, getting to see the efficiency of the AAA pitchers. The Dodgers do such a great job of not rushing people that by the time that you finish that circuit, you really know what you have in a guy. And so I think Cody Hosey has a chance to kind of do both of those this year. I think if he gets off to just an average start in AA, they'll hold him back down there for a while to just kind of let him get his feet underneath himself. But I think if he gets off to any kind of good start, I think somewhere maybe late July, early August, I think he has a chance to move up to Oklahoma City.
Yeah, I think it will come down to playing time. I mean, just what's available. And I think that's going to be a problem as, you saw it. Tulsa, the AA team was loaded. A lot of those guys need to go up to AAA. That's going to be a loaded team. Plus, there's going to be those guys that you talked about. Really, I call the quad A guys that are right in between. The Dodgers or any team will go, well, I need a few of these guys just in case someone goes down. The Dodgers had that shortstop from Oklahoma City last year.
Omar Estevez.
No. He was a veteran. He had played with the Angels before. Gosh darn it.
Well, they had Sheldon Noisy.
Yeah, no, a shortstop, maybe a second baseman. I can't remember, but he debuted with the Angels against the Dodgers in 2020. The Dodgers signed him in 2021. I was blanking because I wrote about him a lot during spring training.
You're talking about Andy Burns?
No, but he's
Elliot Soto.
Soto, thank you. But both Soto and Burns were those types of guys that you have to have on your AAA team because they actually can go up.
Steven Souza Jr., that kind of guy. Matt Davidson.
Yeah, if a Trey Turner goes down, he's a bad example because you could put Taylor there. But
Or-
well,
or
let's use
Lux,
that.
yeah.
Let's say Taylor's busy at second base or third or whatever, and Trey Turner goes down. You've got to be able to bring up somebody that can handle the position defensively first right away.
Sure.
Make sure things are solid, because when you lose your shortstop or some key position like that, you can't just go, well, let's bring in just a bat and not worry
Yeah.
about the defense. You
Sure.
got to and to know how to play. There's a difference between playing in the minors and playing in the majors. It's 5,000, 6,000 versus 55,000
Yeah,
screaming
right.
fans at Dodger Stadium. So yeah, you got to have those guys. So AAA is going to be loaded. I think AA is going to be loaded. I mean, that's, like I think we all got to get out to Oklahoma City and Tulsa and go watch some baseball, especially if this awfulness lockout continues.
I think High A is going to be loaded with some of the better international prospects.
Mm-hmm.
Hanil Choi, I think, will probably start in High A. I don't know that for a fact. And you got guys like Carlos Duran, Robinson Ortiz, and then the guys we talked about last week with Wilman Diaz. It'd be interesting to see what the Dodgers do with Valera, and if they move him up to AA and start him there. That'll be interesting to see what they do with him. So, the Alex DeJesus finished in low A last year. I think he'll probably spend the vast majority of next year in High A Great Lakes. So I think High A is going to kind of be the international draft pick all-star show for the Dodgers, if you will.
Yeah, both High A and Low A is going to be loaded. I mean, I'm expecting Diaz at Rancho, at least crossing my fingers.
Yeah.
Last year we got Cartaya, which was wonderful. Cartaya is either going to be at High A or Double A.
Yeah.
He just missed so much time. You brought up DeJesus, and I know last week we talked about him a little bit as a third base prospect, and I think he's an interesting guy because he's touted as a shortstop. At least that's what you see. But if you look in the details, you go, third base might be his position for the future.
In this organization, definitely.
Yeah,
just because of the talent at shortstop.
Yeah, and so it's going to be really interesting to see where he plays at Great Lakes. I actually have him. Well, I looked at his numbers. Third base, he only played, I think it was 1 inning last year, which was it surprised me. I thought for sure that I'm getting him and Leonard probably confused, but he played 75 games at shortstop and DH 22 times. I mean, he did get passed up by Eddie's Leonard last year, and he's moving up quickly. He got promoted to High A, and DeJesus didn't. And we talked a little about DeJesus again about his slow start, and I looked that up. And real quick, his May slash numbers: 211, 356, 366. June 202, 268, 404. July
got hot.
315, 466, 500.
Yeah.
August 310, 414, 465. September 323, 417, 560.
Finished almost 270. Yeah,
legit. And this goes right back to the Charlie Huff thing. I was talking to it's spring training 2020 before everything went south. They have that hitting instructor. Can't remember his name off the top of my head. He's one of the can't remember it real quick, but
talking about
his
Dylan.
eyes
Are you
lit
talking
up
about Dylan or Brett? Nasiatka,
Craig
or Brett Pill?
No,
Wallenbrock.
Yes,
Wallenbrock.
His eyes lit up with Cartaya and DeJesus.
Yeah, I mentioned that last week. Just watching the amount of torque that he creates with this swing, and he has a little bit of lift in it, which worries me a touch, because anytime you have lift in your swing, you're gonna have a lot of swing and miss to it. But as far as just the amount of power and from what I've seen, just looking at him on video, that's a big time offensive player in the waiting. And so Alex DeJesus, I think I think when you talk about Trey Turner and Chris Taylor could play shortstop if you need to. Gavin Lux grew up a shortstop. Jacob Amaya, some people think, is the best defensive shortstop in the entire organization. Then you go down to guys like Zach Ching. That's a very good baseball player out of Virginia Commonwealth. You look at Valera, who is a big prospect. And then you got guys like Wilman Diaz, Eddie's Leonard. And is it Eddie's Leonard or Leonard?
I get lazy.
Yeah. Okay. So I just looking at his body type, the type of offense that I think he's going to produce, that's where I profile him as a third baseman, because I think he's going to have third baseman type offense where you're going to be able to move him over there. He's going to have that kind of power, and he's going to be a good athlete for that position, and he's going to be able to handle it. So that's where I'm coming from as far as the profile as a possible third baseman, despite the fact that he didn't play a whole lot over there, just simply because the Dodgers are so loaded at shortstop.
Yeah, and I would agree. I mean, he's a guy that, you can't just look at the fielding percentage. I don't even recall that was, but when the scouts, the people, a lot of different eyes of these prospect quote, experts that have seen a lot of them, and they go, well, he's missing that. And remember, they also talk to scouts,
Sure.
Things like that. So he's a guy that third base really seems like a good idea.
Yeah.
The problem is, though, I mean, you've coached way more than I have, but my experience is coaching, I've had excellent shortstops, and we try to do stuff. And this is, juniors level.
It's a whole different deal, man.
Yeah, it is. It's different. We had during an all-star team, we had a plethora of shortstops need third base. And pitching and all that kind of rotated things. So my excellent shortstop that I had all year, we put him at third base. He died. I mean, then he go back to shortstop, and he just couldn't do it.
Yeah,
He all of a sudden got
that was
really
my
messed up.
transition from shortstop to third, and it's a whole different throw. If your ball has, at shortstop, a lot of times you're throwing the ball from a million different positions, sidearm, underarm, and you get a lot of tail on the ball when you do that. If you do that at third base, the ball's not going to be accurate. You need those guys that throw straight over the top, that throw that four seam that straight as a string, and so that's one of those positions that you say, okay, we'll recruit or draft all shortstops and then fill out the rest of all of your positions on the infield with those guys. It's not quite that simple, but the advantage that I think that a guy like that has is that the Dodgers are great in development. We've talked about that, and he has a lot of time. I mean, if the Dodgers so choose to move him over there, I mean, he's going to play 1,500 games over there before he ever has to field a ground ball.
Right.
That's actually going to matter, and we've seen that with Max Muncy, what they've done with him. So I don't worry about that aspect of it. I think if a scout's trying to project whether he can handle a position at third base defensively or not at this stage in his career, okay.
You don't know. You just don't know until you see it.
It sounds fun. It probably makes for great water cooler talk, but
well, they're talking most about what they see at shortstop. Sure. That he doesn't look like he's going to be a shortstop in the future.
Sure.
And there's always people like that, and Corey Seager was like that, and he's done okay at short. I mean, I'd prefer him in a different position myself because Cal Ripken, right? That was a guy that played third, but went to shorts. Well, he started short, went to third, went to short, and he's an all-time great. And he was a really good defensive player at shortstop, despite his build, and despite he wasn't, a real fast guy and all that, but he got the jumps. He had the right moves and all the reactions. So we'll see about Alex. I'm excited about those offensive numbers, though. So if you can hit, they're going to find a spot for you.
Yeah, when it comes to infield play, you have two types of guys. You have what are called box guys, and then you have what are called out of the box guys. And what I mean is, box guys are, hey, he has a certain amount of range, but as long as the ball is within that box of his range, he makes a play every single time. Mm-hmm. And so you weigh that versus, well, the out of the box guys are guys that can literally, like Ryan Sandberg, in my opinion, was a box guy. In other words, I don't think his box was overly huge in the sense that I think there were a lot of other second basemen that got the balls that he didn't. But when the balls were inside of his box, he was the best fielder in baseball for gosh knows how many years. So you have that kind of guy, which was Cal Ripken, Corey Seager, which I love because when you as a manager, as a coach, I want to be able to set up a game plan based off of knowing what a guy's going to do every single time the ball is hit to him or every single time they're at the plate versus the wild card guy, the out of the box guy, of which he might make just routine mistakes and then go make the greatest play of all time. That kind of guy's exciting to watch. He probably has the highest upside, but it's the most difficult to manage on a day-to-day basis because you don't know what to put down on paper as far as putting a game plan together.
That sounds like a player that plays about 30 miles south of where I live. All the talent in the
Fernando
world, leads the league in errors.
Yeah, he's that out of the box guy who will go make, and he will. And I'm just telling you, as great as he is, he drives managers nuts because You know, you just every time the ball's hit to him, you're just not comfortable until you see the out on the board. You know,
Right.
whereas
Yeah.
a ball pretty much is hit to Corey Seager. If it's in his box, the ball's getting to first base. It's going to get caught. The guy's going to be out. You know,
Yeah.
where he makes his errors is when he tries. And to his credit, he tries to step out of his box every now and then. When he does, he's not the greatest of athletes, and that's where the errors come. But the managers know, the Dodgers know, everybody in the game of baseball knows. You know, they have all these metrics. They know, hey, well, that ball was 2 steps outside of his box. That was a step and a half outside of his box. So is that an error that's caused because he's not fielding the ball well, or is that an error caused because that just simply wasn't in his box? And he did not. You know, I know a lot of Dodgers fans. It's kind of the end thing to think Corey Seager wasn't a good defensive player, but it's all for the simple fact that Corey Seager was willing to go outside of his box and try to field balls that he knew from a metrical perspective he stood a good chance to make an error on, but because he wanted to make an out, he was so competitive, and because he liked to win, you know, unlike a lot of guys, he was willing to go outside of his box and try to make plays, and that's where the errors came.
All right. Well, and that's where a guy, well, Trey Turner and Jacob Amaya, what you get out of those guys
Both.
is they're solid, yeah, but their box is a lot bigger.
I agree.
And so that's what's exciting about having Trey Turner at short. I love Seager's an all-time favorite for me and will always be. I think he's still got his picture over here with Kike, with Kike. Yeah, there it is. It's backwards on here. All-time favorite, but yeah, and Amaya, he's gonna play Major League Baseball because he's such a good defensive player and the box is big.
He's an Ozzie Smith type guy, man. He has that kind of release, that kind of pizzazz, that kind of range. He is dynamic, man.
Yeah, and Ozzie, we saw all the spectacular plays, but he made all the plays.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's one of those exciting things to see. And it kind of gives you a little bit of a break at third base a little bit to go, well, Justin Turner doesn't have the range and his box keeps getting smaller and smaller, but I got a Trey Turner whose box is huge.
Right.
And so he can cover that type of room. And then when you have a Luxie at second, whose box is huge also.
Sure.
All of a sudden you've got a lot more coverage. And if you have Muncy at first, for first baseman, Muncy's got his box is pretty huge too. So you go,
correct.
Okay, I think we can cover this because we know how to shift like crazy. And we can cover whether it's, maybe Rios is over there who doesn't have the range of Arenado, right? I mean,
right, sure.
No, then again, who does other than Chapman, I guess. But
right.
You just to cover that, you can make up for it by having those types of things. I think with a left side where you had Seager and Turner, the boxes were both pretty small, and that was kind of the thing where it's like, boy, as a pitcher, I wouldn't be a fan of that. But I think they'll have better defense. But boy, I'm sure going to miss Seager in so many ways.
Yeah,
pretty swing.
Yeah, Austin Barnes is my number one favorite Dodger just because I got to see him in Oklahoma City. I got to see him in 2019 when he got sent down when he was struggling so mightily with the big club. When he came down, he didn't pout, he didn't whine about it. He did nothing but just get to work every day, and I was so proud of him and so happy for him. And I actually got to talk to him on a couple of different occasions. He came up with JT Realmuto in the Marlins organization.
Oh yeah,
Realmuto is from Carl Albert in the Oklahoma City Carl Albert High School. It's in the Oklahoma City area. Here at Guthrie, the school that I coach at is in the same class as Carl Albert. They're actually in our same district, so we play them twice every year in baseball. Play them every year in football. Twice every year in basketball. So I got to see JT Realmuto 8 times in basketball, in baseball, 4 times in football, 8 times in basketball. So I know which he played all 3. So I was very familiar with him, obviously, and then him and Austin Barnes are really close. So when Austin was in Oklahoma City, we struck up a conversation about JT. Those two are really good friends, and Austin took his time in Oklahoma City as a true professional. His first series was in Las Vegas. He went 0 for 3, and then all of a sudden he hit a home run and started feeling better about himself. Then about 3 or 4 weeks later, he's doing quite a bit better. And then the next thing you know, by the end of that next year, 2020, he's catching the last pitch of the World Series to be the World Series champion.
I mean, even halfway through 2020, which was a short season, he still was struggling. Then all of a sudden, remember, there was a little Mookie Betts thing where he credited Mookie for helping him out.
Yeah,
and sometimes it just takes it takes a different voice sometimes.
The interesting part of that situation, and we won't get too much into depth if we run out of time, but there were some people that hey, Barnes is the offensive guy and Will Smith is the defensive guy. I mean, that's kind of the reputation both of them had coming up.
It was.
Yeah, so it's interesting how it's turned up.
It is crazy. Yeah, who'd have thunk it? And
hey, any more thoughts today, Tim?
Did you have any more thoughts on Cody Hosey? We didn't really talk too much about him other than we know he was hurt and is hopefully going to be a Double-A. But any other third baseman type notes you want to that's out there? I mean,
honestly,
why don't we?
Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah. So what do you think? I mean, do you think? So Miggy, what do you? Let's forecast. I'm going to ask you, and you forecast where you think they play in 2022. How about that?
I think Miggy starts in AAA. I think depending on how Matt Beatty does, depending on how a guy like Luke Raley hits when he gets his chances to go up, depending on how Edwin Rios responds coming off the injury list, that will determine whether Miguel Vargas gets to go up and have any substantial amount of at-bats in Los Angeles. So, I mean, I don't mean to pass the buck on that, but I think there's a lot of obstacles for Vargas to have to overcome that are ahead of him at this point for him to actually have an impact in 2022, if that makes any sense, because I think there's a lot of those what I call fringe guys that can really hit, like Matt Beatty, that need at bats. So I think it's going to be interesting to see. I think he will start in Oklahoma City, which is going to be a different experience for him because he has that inside-out type of swing, and he's going to be facing major league type pitchers. Like a perfect example, I talked to this guy's dad last night on Twitter, or I communicated with him. Nick Tropiano, remember that guy that the Dodgers picked up this last year? His dad's name's Paul, and I was communicating with his dad. Well, Nick's a perfect guy I'm talking about in AAA.
Yes.
I got to see him in Oklahoma City in 2014 when he was with Houston, and he actually led back then. It was the PCL, the Pacific Coast League, in ERA. And he's just a guy that if you want him to throw it to a Dixie Cup, he does. If he needs to pitch backwards, he can do that. He has a really wicked changeup. If you need him to come up and function in about 2 or 3 different major league roles, he can do that. Those are the type of guys that Miguel Vargas is getting ready to see. So, so it's going to be fun to watch him and his awesome offensive game go up against guys that can throw it into a Dixie Cup, see if he has any holes, and if he does, whether he can close those holes and move forward from that. And that's really, AAA is really where that gets done, if that makes any sense.
It does.
As far as Cody Hosey, I don't have any thoughts other than do not develop your, I've said this, I know probably 10 times already, do not develop any opinion based on a 2021 when you have an oblique injury for a guy that swings the bat like he does. It's just simply not it's not accurate at all to evaluate him. Now, I know he did go the fall league and hit somewhere around 200 there too. So he just wanted to get as many at bats as he could at the end of 2021 to get as far away from that injury as he can. So I think he's coming into 2022 pretty motivated. He's a guy that's very talented. He was a first-round draft pick. He has the big, long body. He has the big power. He has everything you want in a third baseman. So there's a reason why the Dodgers drafted him. So 2022 will be huge for him. Other than that, I really don't have any thoughts on him.
So Devin Mann, Double-A or Triple-A to start the season?
I think Devin Mann will start AAA would be my guess. Don't quote me on that. He's one of those that's a total guess. I think if you ask people in the Dodgers organization right now, 10 people in the Dodgers organization, I think 5 would say AAA and 5 would say AA. But regardless, I think whether he starts in AA or AAA, he's going to get the exact same amount of bats at both places, if that makes sense, because I think, there could be a little bit of back and forth there. But he's a guy that he's much like Cody Hosey, but he's bringing in a lot more momentum because, he was struggling mightily through July, got hot, finished with the incredible finish that he finished with, and very impressive player. He's played a lot of baseball at a lot of high levels. He's very versatile. He's the exact kind of guy that the Dodgers like in the sense that he has the big frame. He can play both infield, outfield. He can play corner position, so he's very versatile defensively. So he's a guy that he's one of those guys I love to follow because he's the guy where he shows up in the major leagues and all the Dodgers fans go, wait a minute, who's this guy? He never was on this big list here, but he just plugs away and he's a really good player.
Yeah, no, the versatility to me is going to be the key to that guy. I honestly, I don't see him maybe as a long-term third baseman, but I see him as a major league player.
I don't see him as a long-term anything, and I mean that as a compliment.
Right.
I think his stick, if you will be, hey, I can play anywhere, so you can bring me up and plug in 7 different positions, all in one guy, like Chris Taylor. He's kind of like Chris Taylor in that vein.
Yeah, terribly valuable in that way. Okay, I think we beat third base to death.
I think so.
Got to figure out what to do next week.
Yeah, I think next week would be a good topic for all the catchers.
The
catching depth in the Dodgers organization. Golly. And I'm talking to Ryan January today. In fact, as soon as I get off with you, one of the catchers that the Dodgers just acquired in 2020 off the Rule 5 pick. And January is a guy that went to San Jac and JUCO and just absolutely just mashed there. He was one of the better prospects coming out of Swampscott, Massachusetts, which is just north of Boston. He's a guy that has popped as low as 1.88 with his pop time from catcher, so he has a big arm. He's a left-handed swinger, so the Dodgers always like that. Chris Taylor's also a left-handed swinger. And so he's a guy that he...
Carson Taylor.
I do that all the time. Carson Taylor.
Like, wait a minute, Chris Taylor. Wait a minute.
Thank you so much for correcting me on that.
Hey, you never know about CT3. That guy's so
no
versatile, he might just take it up.
No doubt. So he's one of those guys. He had a big year, his first year in the Diamondbacks organization after getting drafted in the 8th round, and then just kind of stalled out from there. We could get into more of that at a later date. We're not going to get that today, but
catchers will be fun because
it'll be a fun one.
They traded Keibert Ruiz, and kind of in some ways it didn't even matter.
No, well,
even though I love the guy,
for the number one reason it doesn't matter is that Will Smith's young, and Austin Barnes. If you were to literally say, hey, describe the perfect major league backup catcher.
Yep.
The guy that can come in and be a leader, the guy that can come in and, hey, if a pitcher's in a slump, maybe, you can throw this. The Dodgers did that with Hamlet Marte. He's another catcher in the
I love Hamlet.
29, 30-year-old. That when a double-A pitcher's struggling, hey, let's bring Hamlet down. Let's let him work with them for 2 or 3 starts, and all of a sudden, things start squaring away with guys. So, Austin Barnes is that guy at the major league level. So from that perspective alone, just the simple fact that Will Smith's going to be one of the better catchers in the league for multiple years, the Dodgers could absorb the loss of Keibert Ruiz. Then when you have guys like Cartaya, Carson Taylor, Hunter Fiducia, Hamlet Marte, Jesus Galise is a guy I've talked to who's an amazing young prospect. Yainer Fernandez is a great young prospect. And as a catcher, Ryan January, who I'm going to miss a couple of them, so I'm going to stop right there. But we'll talk about the catcher's position next week. There's a bunch of them, so that'll be exciting.
Yeah, and a note on Austin Barnes: it was no accident that after the Game 4 disaster of the 2020 World Series, that Austin Barnes caught those last 2 games.
If you go back to my Twitter in 2020, and you can read after the 4th game, my comment was very simple: catch Austin Barnes the rest of the way.
Yeah, I wrote a whole article about it in Dodgers Nation also.
Yeah, it was pretty obvious that just as good as Will Smith was, it was Austin Barnes' time to. The Dodgers had enough offense. They needed that veteran presence that could settle the pitching down, and just get what you needed out of the pitching. And Barnes did that, and it was a great run, wasn't it?
And they had the DH too.
Yeah.
And hey, guess what? If we get to play 2022, we have the DH, which I still hate.
And a shortened season.
Might as well take advantage of it. That means Will Smith gets more at bats. That means Austin Barnes gets to catch a little bit more. So you have a fresh Will Smith and Austin Barnes. That it seems that certain pitchers like him a little bit better, a little bit of best of both worlds.
Sure.
We got to get Will Smith is, like you said, one of the best catchers. His offense is amazing. I mean, I am as shocked as anybody, but I'm pleasantly shocked.
No doubt about it. Is that all you got, Tim?
I do. That's it.
Hey, that's a wrap for this week. We're glad that you tuned in. As always, for Dodgers Prospects, I'm Casey Porter of Dodger Poke Report. And for Tim Rogers of Dodgers 2080, we're glad that you tuned in. And as always, go Dodgers.